Welcome to another internal fireside chat. Today I talk with Ryan Barker. Ryan's CTO at Zefr, a company that helps advertisers understand what videos might exist on different social media platforms like YouTube or TikTok so they can pair up what they want to advertise and what they want. Ryan will talk more about that. But there's a few interesting things he talks about that I think that you'll enjoy. We talk a lot about how GenAI changes the world of an engineering organization and the world of a CTO, both how to manage people in the org and how to talk with C-level execs. We talk about velocity and how GenAI requires increased velocity, how engineering organizations need to move faster, and we talk about some of the tooling that you might need to buy or develop in order to do that. Turns out that in the GenAI world, that data becomes a monopoly. Leaders in data become a natural monopoly. And we talk about what that effect is on engineering organizations. So stay tuned. I think you'll enjoy it. Hello, Ryan, and thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, David. I always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I've known Ryan for a long time through the CTO world, for the LA CTO forum that we're both involved in. Ryan, before we jump in, talk a little about your role, talk about Zefr, talk about what you guys do. That's going to set context for everything else.
Great. I've been working at Zefr for 7 years. I started as a software architect, helped really transform the system, and been CTO for 2 years. What we do is we analyze content on TikTok, Meta, and YouTube. So this is the hardest content in the world to analyze. Is user-generated content. There are hundreds of millions of pieces of content to analyze, and we have hundreds of different labels we try and apply that are relevant to advertisers, right? So the main reason people use us is to make sure that when they run an ad, it is next to content that is acceptable for their brand, right? Or suitable for the brand, as we say. So if you're an alcohol manufacturer, you're like, there is no way I can be around kids content. I'm going to get in trouble with the law. Like I could lose my liquor license. It's like a major deal. Okay. While if you're a toy manufacturer, you're like, great, I want to be around kids content. They're the people who buy my toys. I want them to be like going to, it's Christmas time here. As you can see, you're going to harass, hey, daddy, I need XYZ toy that I just saw on YouTube. Please buy it for me, right? Which has literally happened to me this morning. So it's an interesting world.
So you have a giant many-to-many matching problem.
It is many-to-many matching problem. But prior to this, I worked at eHarmony, which is also a many-to-many matching problem. Although in that case, the toy has to like the child as well, which is a little different. Yeah. Which maybe if GenAI goes a little bit farther, that may have to become true at some point. But yeah, it's a very difficult problem. There's hundreds of millions of things to analyze, and we need to do it very quickly and accurately within very tight cost controls. And GenAI is incredibly powerful, and it's a very innovative technology. And how to integrate that into our system has been a topic for the entire year.
Okay, so you have a bunch of algorithms previously. They work to some degree of usefulness. I'm going to say of everyone in the industry, yours are the best. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to go with yes. And
we definitely say we're the best, and I am confident that everything in development is definitely better than what anyone else has, including us. So,
right. So now there's this new set of algorithms that come along that change even how you develop code, right? Fundamentally. How does your world as a CTO change when the algorithmic set changes, when GenAI comes in?
Yeah, so this is really, it's really a question about change management, right? Change happens, at the small scale, you personally have some issue you have to deal with. It could be your company has some issue, someone quits. It could be your industry, some new thing comes in. In this case, it is a global, massive new technology innovation, similar to, the Industrial Revolution or the automobile or computers in general or the phone. And it's just going faster and faster and faster. GenAI is going incredibly fast. And the answers I have today are not the same as they were literally last night, because there's new articles and the world's just going incredibly crazy and incredibly fast. But as a CTO, it's your job to keep up with this stuff and really figure out how to utilize this new technology and how to convince people to change. No one likes to change. I have a routine. I wake up a certain time. I go to work a certain time. And then COVID happens. I have to change, right? This is GenAI. It's the exact same thing, but people don't feel they need to in the same way. They don't necessarily feel the same sense of urgency, right?
Why is that? That's interesting. Why do you think people don't feel a sense of urgency? To me, this is flipped my world over. This has flipped over the world of a lot of our clients.
It has flipped your world over, right? What about the people reporting to you? Well, a little bit less. Reporting to them, a little bit less. You get down to the new grad from college. They're like, I'm just working in whatever. Like, it doesn't matter to me if I use GenAI or not. And if the company doesn't do well, I'll go somewhere else. And it's not like a huge thing. I'm used to doing this thing. And that's even on the engineering side. On the non-engineering side, people have their livelihoods and jobs at stake. Do you want do you think your customer service people are like, oh yeah, just like take GenAI and put us entirely out of, like, I don't know, I don't need a job. Like, people are scared. And understandably, this is an incredibly powerful technology. And people will need to change the type of jobs they do, but they sometimes have to be convinced to do it, right? Whether you have to be nice or whether you have to like give them examples like, hey, you're just going to increase the amount of work you're able to produce, right? We're not going to like get rid of you. We're just going to have you do more using these new tools, right? But yeah, it's incredibly difficult. It's going so fast and it's so like, I can say, oh yeah, we can do X, Y, Z today, but we can't do this other thing. And then, there's a demo yesterday for Gemini and it's really amazing. Of course, you find out it's a little bit fake. That's a whole nother discussion. But you don't necessarily want to give your salespeople and marketing people a prototype and have them have their way with it.
So you've got this looking down problem, people in your organization that you have to get on the train, get excited about using some of this stuff. So I'm interested in hearing about how you get them on the train, but I'm also interested in how you talk with your C-level peers, how you talk with the CEO, how you talk with the board about the possibilities of what it can do, and also don't get too excited. It doesn't do everything.
Yeah, well, it's especially difficult in our industry because they are actually try and stay on top of all the new data science things, and they hear like, oh, our competitors using XYZ for everything, and I like run the math. I'm like, they're not spending $10 million. I promise you, like, there's not. So they're just lying, and it is what it is. So let's cut this into a few parts of your question. So first, how to get people excited, how to get people to actually do it, right? So we have a ton of engineers working for us who are super smart, super motivated. They follow the news for all the Gen AI things. They're playing with it. They're posting cool images on Facebook or other places. And how do you get them to contribute and come up with their ideas, right? So we talked about it a little bit, and we're just like, let's just do a hackathon. It's not scheduled till March, but screw it. It's September. We're just going to hackathon, no notice. And 8 of the 10 projects were about Gen AI, and they're all super interesting. None of them will be exactly that way in the actual product, but definitely influence what we're building this quarter and next quarter. And it really like influences the roadmap to get your smartest people that you're paying a huge amount of money, get them engaged and excited and contributing ideas, right? So I think that's really important. Now the C-suite, it's interesting, right? So, I see the news article and I pay attention to all this stuff. I see it back when ChatGPT 4 was released. I'm like, hey, this is really interesting. I do a little playing. I'm like, hey, maybe we might be able to use something. I tell the C-suite, and it's pretty much crickets, right? They're not ready to hear it. Like their friends haven't talked about it. They haven't seen one in the industry do it, talk about it. So, in this case, it's very obvious anyone in the tech industry, this will become a thing. So you have to figure out how to devote some of your time, get an intern, get, some amount of like development effort, trying to do these prototypes and find something valuable to the company. So when they are ready to hear what you're trying to say, they're like, oh, hey, this GenAI thing, my friend said is really useful. It's like, oh, well, we've been doing investigation. We're on top of it. Here is, a bunch of different options we have. Here's equality here. Here's equality there. And you try and teach them about some of the limitations, right? Especially for our industry, it's very difficult because the GenAI likes to make things up. I don't know how to say it other way. It just literally like makes things up. People call it hallucinating. My favorite example, there's a very popular kids comic. I guess it's not kids anymore. I'm sure I'm age. Called Dragon Ball Z. It's been out 20 years, so whatever. It's not kids anymore. And there's this channel about it. It's very interesting, like world. People are, flying around and, saving the world and throwing fireballs at each other. And you ask the GenAI, like, hey, is this anime? They're like, yes, 100% anime. You're like, is this cooking? They're like, no, 0% cooking. You're like, is this combat sports? They're like, 100% yes. You're like, wait, let's hold back. This is not wrestling or boxing. This is like throwing fireballs at each other. Like, what are you talking about, right? And so like mistakes like these will happen. And how do you explain this to the C-suite, right? Because the mistakes that we've been using AI for years and it makes mistakes. But the mistakes this is making are in a totally different way. They're not used to this kind of mistake. It's very different than what a human might make a mistake, right? A human might call, two kids like wrestling or whatever, like, oh, that's combat sports. We're like, oh no, we mean professional combat sports, and they like correct themselves, right? It's certain, no human would be like, oh yeah, this like comic book is of the superheroes fighting is combat sports, right? So it's really, you have to like give them concrete examples, and if you're lucky enough, I'm not necessarily, that they're like really good statistics and math. You're like an actual like full-blown tech company with a tech founder. You can talk about F1 scores and precision and recall and exact accuracy and, how it varies between concepts and the difficulty of what you're trying to judge. But most of us have a less technical founders, and trying to explain to them, hey, here's things it does really well, right? You wanted to summarize all this text, feed in 100 pages and summarize it, right? That's great. And maybe I'll show you an example. Like here's your competitor's, shareholder call, right? And I'm going to feed it into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize it. And so it's not 30 minutes, it's just like 3 paragraphs. And you show it to me like, oh, that's really cool. I understand now that this system can summarize content really well for me, right? And then you're like, okay, well, it turns out there's this new thing called RAG, which I can't remember the exact what it means, because everyone just says RAG. And it basically means you're passing in your own data, or Wikipedia or some other data. In our case, it's very important you pass in your own data. Okay, there's no value to passing Wikipedia. That's just generic, right? So you want to pass in your own data to get custom results out, right? Whether you're passing in your own sales data or any other sort of like financial data, it now becomes yours, right? This is your proprietary data.
You're learning on top of the foundation model.
Yes. So it's a custom model, which is a little different than distilling, which I'll talk about in a second. But basically, it's in our case, we pass in all the legacy. It's not even legacy. All the video level scores that we have. We have all these labels from very, very cheap models. So we've spent years developing. All our IP is in this, right? And we're feeding it into the system. We're asking to make summaries off of that. And it will take into account all the old data, combine it with the text data that's very good at, and come up with, a really amazing, textual summary of the data. It can generate scores, all kinds of really cool new things that we could never have done before, right? It allows us to directly compete with competitors that, we never focused on XYZ, but now we can toss this technology at it and, really catch up very quickly.
The technical details, I would argue, are interesting if they're excited about the technology, but maybe not as interesting if they're not. But if they're not, but you believe that there's opportunity here. Do you find, in that case, I would argue that maybe what you're meant to do is talk about possible solutions that you can now do that you didn't do before. Do you think that's true? And do you think that's differentiated from it in a Gen AI world from a non-Gen AI world? Is this just more of the same about pitching C-level executives possible solutions and investments that you want to make? Or is it fundamentally different?
So I've been a CTO for 2 years. So I could talk 2 years ago and talk about it now, right?
Okay.
2 years ago, it was much more about how do we make incremental improvements. Is very clear. Like, we had a path we're going to go down. We're going to make this improvement, this improvement, this improvement. We know what we're going to do for the next year. Okay. This is entirely the same, except it's what are we doing the next 3 months, right?
So your window is shrunk.
The window is
your planning window is shrunk.
It's not just planning. Your development window is shrunk. The amount of time you're willing to spend on quality, or whether you're willing to cut features, like it is much more about time to market right now, because everyone is racing to get the new products out and be the first to land a quality product, right? I literally had a discussion earlier this week, and it was about, how are we going to bring this new improvement to the market? And we said, okay, well, our current plan is we're going to do this video level improvement, and then we're going to do the channel level improvement, and it's going to make an amazing set of new product, right? And the other option is we could do a smaller improvement on the channel side, and then, the video, then the channels. It's like, well, let's just go as quickly as we can. Let's just get the Gen AI channel stuff in place and allow us to start selling the new technology and increase the quality over time. Which is, standard agile development in some ways, except just at a much faster pace, right?
So,
the 3-month turnaround is just not fast enough. They want it they want it yesterday, but, they want it very quick.
So the question is in the world after you have fielded the model the first time, mm-hmm. you now have to keep the model up. How do you do that? What's the process? Is that fundamentally different than software development process? I think it is. Your mileage may vary. And if it is different, what does that look like in your engineering work?
Right. So we've worked for years now on trying to do this, right? How do you apply software development methodologies to machine learning? And there's no term to this, to my knowledge. So CI/CD or CICM, continuous modeling or something like that. So we have constantly changing data. So it's really, the data drifts, and there's technology drifts, and there's new technology. And how do you continually update the models, right? And how do you keep track of things? And how do you prioritize what new technologies to apply where, right? So really what we've done is we've applied standard engineering practices, right? So we automate the data pipeline, we automate the new new data set to score. We automate the system that feeds in and prioritizes new data to be labeled, right? The entire process for these AI systems is you have some idea like, hey, what's a video game, right? And some new video game gets released, Diablo 4 comes out or whatever. And does the machine know about this? Well, yeah, Diablo 4 sounds like Diablo 3, it gets it correct, right? Some other new game comes out, it gets it wrong. And so you're like, okay, how do we teach it this new thing? And so we really want to distill down the model and make it smaller. So basically, we have these very expensive, giant OpenAI models or Google's models, whatever we're using. And we collect a bunch of training data about one particular question, and we're trying to turn this OpenAI model into like an idiot savant. So it knows very well video games, and that's all it really knows, right? But it can do it very cheaply. So we basically have completely automated a system to continually find new sources of data, prioritize it, get it labeled, retrain the model, and then the critical point is to do the data validation, right? So this is standard data science. You have a holdout set. So you have, maybe 20% of your data set is just kept over to the side. You never look at it except when you're validating how good your model is. And at the end of the day, you're like, okay, is my precision recall F1 at least the same or close enough? And we're just going to deploy to production. And you want to do this, right? You want to deploy the newer model. The default is deploy, like you want to deploy, just like regular software development. And in this case, you want to deploy because the world is constantly changing. And if you don't deploy, it's going to be worse at the new things, which are the most important things.
So drift will
happen. Drift happens in the data set. And it doesn't matter if you you want to get Tide Pod Challenge correct, but it doesn't matter nearly as much as getting like the Gaza War or whatever happened last week, right? So keeping your model up to date with the world is really a competitive advantage when these OpenAI models are 6 months old, a year old. They're trained very infrequently because it costs, I think, $100 million to make one of these models. And we can train a new model for, I don't know, $100, something like that. So
you're always deploying.
Really,
you're always training. You're always deploying because topicality happens, which means drift happens. And so you have a tool set to help you run through this to make it so that you can do continuous, CI/CD. I'll call it that, right? Part of that tool set, I assume you developed. Part of that tool set you've purchased. The tools that are available out in the market are changing at least as frequently as some of the models are. How do you, as a CTO, say, okay, here's a bunch of new tools that came out. I'm going to invest in these tools. I'm going to skip these tools because they're not valuable enough, or I think they're going to be obsolete in 3 days, or it's like, so you've got tooling, purchasing decisions in real time all the time.
This is my life, David. You're just constantly evaluating what and looking at various risks. You're like, okay, do I want to take some off the shelf total system, right? Microsoft has one, AWS has one, Google has one. Get vendor lock-in, get charged 10 times as much, but my time to market is going to be much faster, right? Or do I want to take some open source things and wire it together myself, or use some, small new startup, right? Say those are the options. Small new startup, big company, build it yourself, right? You're like, oh, the big company must be fine, right? Google abandons products. OpenAI fired their CEO, then hired their CEO back. Almost lost their entire dev team. Like it's a crazy world, right? You're like, there's no way that could happen. No way it actually did, right? And then the alternative is you build it yourself, and that has a huge cost, right? We have chosen to build it ourselves. We considered our data science models a And the fact we can do things so cheaply is a business differentiator, right? We can choose to undercut. We can choose to spend more money in higher quality, whatever we need from a business perspective at the time for whatever product we're doing. We have better data science for the dollar than you can buy off the shelf. Much better, right? Like we'll say 10 times better than off the shelf, like cost quality trade-offs, right? But really, I think it's up to each CTO to do the investigation. And if you want to take the risk with a small company, maybe it'll work. Maybe they'll get bought out. But you saved a bunch of money in the meantime, and then you have to migrate a year from now. If that's all you can afford, right? If you have an existing data science team, it might be worth it. In our case, it was to try and convert them and just use this as another new tool, right? It's just another new tool. Just keep up to date with the latest and greatest and use it to keep our competitive advantage and allow us to continue to use that as a product differentiator.
Because one could make the argument that, like a lot of other things, if it's strategic, you want to develop it yourself. If it's not, you want to outsource it, you want to license it. For you, data and the data manipulation is by definition strategic. But is the reason you're doing it for that, developing your own tools for that reason, or the tools that you need don't exist on the market yet, or some combination, or a third thing?
You can't buy what we do. This is part of the problem. Like, you literally can't. At the cost that we're able to do it, there's just no one on the market can do it at that cost. And so a little bit, yes. Now the thing is, if you were starting a new company today, right? Would I go hire up a brand new data science team? Well, you haven't proven product market fit. Like, you could take off the shelf things. And as I've mentioned, the important thing for these new data science models is that you pass in your own data. That is what is worth the money. The data is worth the money, right? It's similar in many ways to the like databases, right? Like, before good databases existed, maybe the fact that you could like query your data quick was worth something. But now there's Elasticsearch and you have your Postgres, and you can basically take off the shelf technology and just use it. It's very cost effective. And the gap between what you can do with off the shelf and what you can build yourself is constantly shrinking. But again, like it depends on your focus. In our case, like, our data science models are the differentiator. We invest in it, and that is why we have the highest quality for the cost of any vendor I've looked at.
Got it. So what this is interesting, because this reminds me of something that I read and posted on LinkedIn about the Federal Trade Commission and the monopolies I think that might happen in the AI world. And one of them was a data monopoly. And if what that argues is, if the benefit of the model is demonstrable to the user, then they get more customers, they get more data. It becomes a natural monopoly over time in a particular vertical.
No, it's definitely true. Our industry, we're the smallest of the three companies that can do what we do. And the two larger companies have a ton of data. They haven't had a data science team. They haven't had an engineering team for a long time, and they're building one up, and they have data. And that's, if they know how to use it and they've collected it long enough, it's allowing them to catch up much faster than they would be able to, right? These new GenAI systems let you catch up, right? This is one of the things, but we're using it to catch up too, right? Is this a double-edged sword, right? They've invested all this time and energy in doing this and that we haven't focused on, and we're like, oh, now we can do that too in a couple of weeks, right? With GenAI, and it doesn't require us doing a bunch of investigation or anything like that. We can just copy their feature set with off-the-shelf software.
Got it. So that goes back to your previous thing about velocity. Velocity is Velocity is faster. Windows.
Velocity is right now, velocity is king. Like, you want to build the best product you can as fast as you can. And it just, your engineering team may kill you if because things are breaking all the time, but like there's not much of another option, right? Money is tight, so you have to go like with the fast, cheap, good. Money is tight, so you have to go cheap, and technology's moving so fast, you have to go fast. So something has to give,
right?
But we do what we can, right? So in addition with continuous modeling, you want to make sure you're focusing resources on automated testing and automated monitoring, alerting, so that people are able to when things break, and they can fix them quickly, and it doesn't impact all the things you're trying to build. So the standard software development like methodology still holds. It's just about moving a lot faster.
Got it. So okay, so Conway tells us people ship their org chart, right? Our friends that wrote Team Topologies talks about the reverse Conway maneuver, building your org design so that it ships the kind of architecture of the product you want. Do you have a fundamentally different org design in the Gen AI world than you did before, or is it the same, or is it the similar org design, but numbers in one group are different than they were before, numbers in a different group are different tools for?
It's definitely changed, particularly recently. So as I mentioned, a lot of this is like how to move faster, right? Like how do you take a team and make them move faster, right? When in our case, we have giant enterprise clients who expect quality, right? So how, like, this is like a dichotomy, like how do we do this, right? And so what we've done recently, and seems to be working well, is we actually have sort of split off, I don't know exactly what to call it. It's a prototyping team. It's not like permanent hackathon, although you could kind of imagine it like that, where their goal is to crank out a ton of prototypes, have sales pitch it to clients, have product people look at it, have the C-suite look at it, and just, constantly iterate within and making constantly new little demos, and see what lands, right? And then the things that do land, the product people actually go and build it out in a standard like agile process. And prototyping is in the agile process, but this is a squad, in our case, of the developers who really like to work in this particular environment. There are some who don't. Do not put them on this team. It's very important. You need to put how to put it. Some of these engineers, when put into more rigid environments, fail, right? This is why a lot of people, when they go to Google, they fail, right? They work at these startups, they like to go fast paced, they're building all these stuff, and they go to Google and things take 6 months to do anything, right? And they just fall apart. So you want sort of your fastest movers, probably the ones who are least likely to get the last 10% of the ticket done. Like they're the ones you want over here, right? Which is actually nice, because it like the people who like to complete everything actually don't have to, manage the people who are trying to go very quickly. So we've basically now have, in addition to our standard squad setup where we'd have a different squad for where we're doing for the quarter, we also have like a prototype squad. And then I have an intern for me who does whatever crazy thing. I'd read some article. I'm like, I want to try, I have this idea, and here's an idea, go try and make something with it. And this sort of, the teams sort of feed into each other. And sometimes some prototype will come out and we'll interrupt the quarter and just add it in. But often you're just doing prototypes for what you're going to be focusing next quarter.
So you have a scruffy team. People like to start but don't like to finish. I'm putting words in your mouth. You've got a guy or a girl, woman or man who just does arbitrary things that come out of your head, like Athena out of Zeus's head. And then you've got the traditional we ship stuff team. But the weight of the scruffy team is bigger and the interruption risk is higher for the we ship stuff team.
Yes, much. Yeah, that's basically true, right? And the percent of product ideas that we ship in a quarter that were the same as what they thought they would do when they kicked off the quarter planning is going down slightly. Not a lot, but 5-10% lower. Instead of shipping 65-70% of what they thought they were going to do, it's down to 55-60, right? And that's okay, right? It's very important to be able to react quickly in this environment. Whether it's your idea or your competitor came up with something and oh shit, I need to copy that. What do I do? Oh, they must use GenAI. How can I use GenAI? Okay, I can copy that in 4 weeks, right? Where before, without the GenAI, you're like, oh no, they spent 9 months on that. Now I'm screwed, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
So your say-do ratio is going down. That must have an effect for the people that just like to ship. That must have a morale effect on them because everyone is shifting left.
Yeah, it's tough. Now, luckily, we've always, at Zefr, we've always had teams that like to move pretty quickly. We've always been a 2-week agile thing, and they're kind of used to my whims, shall we say? So it's a change of a few percent here and there. It's very obvious on a graph. It's not so obvious in practice, and it happens over time, and people just get used to it. And I feel like the work from home setup, right? We have hybrid setup for us, and some people are full remote. Really helps the people who like to try and finish things, being able to focus, and they feel better that they're able to focus and get something done. So even though they might not know as well what they're doing next month, they're at least able to focus on what they're trying to build right now. And with a sprint process that we don't change mid-sprint, right? So it's not as disruptive as it might sound. It's very disruptive for the product managers though. They may not like that, but that's not the developer's problem, at least.
So I'm interested in product development, the product management stuff. Let's hold that off to our next conversation. Thank you very much for educating us, for stepping us through these, and we have a whole product management conversation that we can have that we'll do next time.
Thank you so much for having me, David. I really appreciate it. I hope people found parts of this interesting, or at least entertaining, and look forward to talking to you again.
Look forward to talking to you. Thank you.